Welcome. We're here at the Canada Strong and Free Conference 2022 here in Ottawa, Ontario. And guess who I caught up with? Scott Henning, president of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, very important advocacy group. And I saw your shirt. Can you show your shirt to the camera? Support your local money printer. And there's a picture of Justin Trudeau, a hammer and sickle money printing union, established 2020. Okay, tell us, what is this about?
Central Bankers Unite, yes. I mean, as we know, over this last couple of years, we've seen the most amount of money printing in this country that we've ever had in the history. It doesn't even compare to World War II. I mean, and it's the Bank of Canada taking all this debt on without any collateral, without any sort of backing that you would normally have with a bank. And it's causing this inflation. I mean, look, we've heard about Russia, we've heard about supply chain issues. The bottom line is you can't print an extra $350 billion, throw it in the economy and expect it's going to have no impact.
But if you subscribe to the magic money tree theory, then I guess you can print whatever you like.
Yeah, I mean, and that is who I think a lot of people are listening to is the fairies up in the magic money tree telling them it's okay. It's not okay, and the fact remains is that we now have so much more money in the economy, and it's taken a little time to get through that. This is how it plays out. We get the inflation. We get 6, 7, 8% inflation that most of us in our lives have not seen.
That's what I was going to say. We haven't seen this in our lifetime, especially for the younger generation, those who are trying to enter the housing market. It's a glass ceiling. I don't think they see any hope of shattering it.
No, and I feel bad for those folks too, seeing those numbers go up and up and up. And it's hard to keep wages going up that way. I mean, I'm an employer as well. We hire people. We're seeing wages go up. We're also seeing supply of people available down. I mean, it's been tough for a lot of employers being hit by COVID, then trying to deal with inflation, which they can't always pass totally on. You know, they're being hit with it on their supply chain. They may not be able to pass it on through the final product on their end. And on top of that, trying to deal with less people out there wanting more wages, it's really a tough time right now.
Okay, so in terms of fiscal policies and taxation policies, what new initiatives, and I say that not in a positive way, do you feel are coming down the gamut and that concern you?
Always a wealth tax we're worried about. I mean, it's always easiest to point your finger at the rich person and say you should pay more when you don't know how much they're paying already. Worried about a home equity tax. I know the government keeps saying no, but on the other hand, we see the CMHC continuing to fund more and more studies along that line. We just recently, we discovered, our investigative journalist dug up that another $200,000 was given from the CMHC to the Generation Squeeze group that was out there promoting the idea. And they explicitly say in the emails that we have that this idea hasn't caught on and we need to do more to push it. So this is not a dead issue. The government has said no, they're not going to do it. Yet, on the other hand, we have a government crown corporation funding more and more advocacy towards a home equity tax. So that one's always one in the back of my mind that I'm worried about.
So one of the top issues currently, provincially, federally, is this issue of housing. Mm-hmm. How would the implementation of a home equity tax affect housing supply and affordability? Well,
there's an old adage, if you want less of something, tax it. I mean, we try to tax pollution to try to reduce it. They're trying to tax, put sin taxes on things like alcohol and tobacco to try to reduce usage. So when you put a tax on something like a house, we're only going to reduce supply. This is a very simple supply and demand issue. We have a lot of demand for housing. We don't have enough supply. We need to unshackle those who are building houses and let them increase the supply, bring down house prices naturally. There's nothing governments can really do except make it worse.
Okay, is there anything else that's concerning you? I know we have this almost insurmountable debt that we've accumulated now. What are we going to do? What would you like to see the government do?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is Franco on our team has done some of the analysis on this. He showed that basically had the government gone back to pre-pandemic spending levels, we'd be back to a balanced budget and on our road to start paying down that debt. So, I mean, it's simple. It's really simple. Spend less. This government already collects enough in taxes, especially with the inflation the way it is now. That's bringing more revenue for the government. All they need to do is spend less. And with the pandemic now not in sort of an emergency situation, they can spend less.
Okay, we have about 45 seconds left. What do you say to the Canadians who are thinking of leaving Canada? We've seen record emigration, people leaving the country. Things are becoming too unaffordable here. What do you say to those Canadians?
Yeah, I mean, I hope to say I'm not going to be following you that way. I mean, I don't want to be thinking about that as our only option. I think we need to try to fix Canada and hopefully bring back Canadians who have left. But I mean, look, we've been seeing brain drain for many years. This is not new. We've seen, attractiveness down in the States with jobs for doctors and people who have put a lot of time into their education. We need to start drawing them back. We're not going to draw them back by guilting them. Mm-hmm. We're going to draw them back by making it a better environment up here for them.
Okay, well, thank you so much today. Always a pleasure to speak with you again. Scott Henning, President of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation here at the Canada Strong and Free Conference.
Okay. If you have a medical emergency outside Canada, your provincial health insurance plan will only pay a small fraction of the costs. And with the rising cost of healthcare abroad, choosing a dependable travel medical insurance program is more important than ever. Medipack insures most stable pre-existing medical conditions at any age. Medipack is the only travel insurance program recommended exclusively by the Canadian Snowbird Association and the Royal Canadian Legion. And you can depend on the professionals at Medipack Assist to guide you through any foreign medical system and get you back to Canada. That's why Canada's most experienced travelers trust Medipack. Call now for your free Medipack Early Bird Travel Insurance Guide and learn how you can save up to 28% if you enroll by August 31st. Protect your family with a travel insurance program you can depend on. Choosing the right travel insurance is simple. Call 1-877-633-4722 or go to medipack.com. That's 1-877-MEDIPACK. Call now.
At secondstreet.org, we ask governments uncomfortable questions. For example, why do we often see businesses cut employee salaries when times get tough, yet we rarely see governments cut their employee salaries? We asked the federal government, all 10 provinces, and 13 major cities, when was the last time you took a pay cut? The answers range from decades ago to never. If you think this type of research is important, please sign up for our email updates at secondstreet.org.
Treaty in Cree is Naskomitoin, an oral agreement, and our agreements were always spoken. For George Spence, the core of treaty was Wichihioin, to help one another.
And so we, the commissioners,
He was there for the making of Treaty 9, where the Cree were told,
we will honor this agreement together for as long as the sun shines and the waters flow.
the Cree made their mark because they were assured that the land would be shared and they would always be able to harvest what they needed. George Spence was my great-grandfather. In his life, he saw many promises of the treaty go unfulfilled.
Treaties were essential to the creation of Canada. First Nations still fight for the agreements to be honored.
Are you confused by which app to use to invest with? Perhaps a conversation with a professional is a better approach to investing for you. Our investment advisors are here to help you so that you don't have to invest alone. Call us at 1-800-387-0859 or email invest@caldwellsecurities.com.
Welcome. We're here at the Canada Strong and Free Conference here 2022 here in Ottawa, Ontario. And joining me, someone I just bumped into, and we've had him on as a guest several times, is Dr. Charles Burton, Senior Fellow with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Dr. Burton, thanks for spending this time with us today. We just heard from a leadership debate for the CPC leadership. Huawei came up. There was a discussion about Jean Charest's connection to Huawei, what his history is. So I think, as our viewers might be concerned as to what exactly is the concern with Huawei. Is that a real bona fide threat here in Canada?
I think it is. I mean, earlier in his career, Mr. Charest was defending Huawei as a company which did not pose a threat to Canadian security. Subsequently, it was found out that he was on the Huawei payroll, and one of the questions that came up in the course of a very exciting debate was, how much money did you make from Huawei? Give me the figure. Well, he didn't do that. Disappointing. But he's also been involved with a law firm which has had done a lot of work with Chinese state companies and helping them to better penetrate the Canadian economy. And these are things which threaten our freedom. There is no question, because all of the of our other allies, all of them have banned Huawei from integrating into the 5G network with their hardware and software solutions, because it's seen that Huawei is beholden to the Chinese state and could be called upon to assist the Chinese state with downloading databases or with information about critical infrastructure. So it's just prudent that we shouldn't have a Chinese military associated company involved in our telecommunications. and Huawei is complicit in surveillance and monitoring technology that's being used in China against Chinese people and against the Uyghurs and the Tibetans. And I don't think Canada wants to have any part in enabling that kind of activity.
Certainly. Now, you mentioned the Five Eyes. Canada's a part of the Five Eyes. What does it mean when we're on the outside with respect to our relationship with Huawei? How does that hinder our relationship with the rest of the member parties of Five Eyes?
Well, I think that, we're looking at a situation most recently with the US-UK-US consortium with regard to Asia-Pacific security, where 3 of the Five Eyes are collaborating to try and deal with the China threat, and they're not inviting Canada to join. And of those countries, the UK is not an Asia-Pacific nation, last I saw, and Canada definitely is. So why aren't we there? And why is it that the US is consulting with the UK, preparing for the Chinese action on Taiwan, but nothing with Canada? I think it's really because our government is identified as a weak link in international security, and that the leadership of our government is seen as too implicated by the Chinese regime because of conflict of interest due to receiving benefits from the Chinese state through various board memberships or business opportunities and so on. This is really an issue that our next government has to deal with. We need a Foreign Influence Transparency Scheme Act or a Foreign Agents Registry Act so that people who are recipients of benefit of a foreign state have to make it transparent to the public so we know if they're speaking in ways which support the agenda of those foreign states in Canada, that they have a conflict of interest, and maybe we shouldn't be giving them as much credit as we might if we felt that they were simply acting without conflict of interest.
And then we can't ignore the 2 Michaels. Obviously, there was, a big scandal, a big concern when it took us almost 2 years or 2 years plus to repatriate them. How can Canada, in good conscience, continue to engage with Huawei given what's happened with the 2 Michaels? We have about 45 seconds left.
Well, I think this really does call into question the future of the international diplomatic and international trade regime if we have a situation where the world splits into 2 factions again, the autocrats led by Russia and China against nations committed to liberal democracy, reciprocity and the equality of states, citizenship and human rights, then we will simply have to start tightening up our supply chains to ensure that we are not going to be subject to economic coercion in a future cold or even hot war that may be coming up, before not very long.
Okay. Well, I think that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for stopping by. Again, we're reporting here from the Canada Strong and Free Conference in Ottawa 2022. Thank you.
At secondstreet.org, we ask governments uncomfortable questions, such as how many patients die each year while waiting for the government to provide surgery. We obtained government data that showed 1,480 patients died while waiting for surgery in 2018. The data also showed some patients' lives could have been saved if waiting lists had been shorter. Do you think governments should be required to proactively release this information to the public? If you agree, sign up for our email updates at secondstreet.org.
All I wanted was to see a movie. One down, please.
I can't sell downstairs tickets to you people.
How dare they? I could afford to buy the more expensive ticket. I run my own business. But they refused to take my money. They left me there all night. On what charge? They said I didn't pay the theater tax. But it was really about color.
Sister Desmond, appeal this conviction and your community will stand behind you.
Do you have any idea what this will do to us?
So what are you going to do? Make it right.
Viola Desmond's case inspired Nova Scotia's civil rights movement. She was pardoned 63 years later based on the injustice of her conviction.
As one of Canada's leading ETF providers, BMO ETFs have partnered with investors for over a decade, delivering insights and growth through core investments, innovation, responsible investing, and income solutions. Start today at bmo.com/ETF.
Whether you take your kids to soccer, hockey, or the park, traveling is a part of our lives. Canada is a leader in finding solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The Canadian oil and gas sector is the largest investor in clean energy technology and is committed to a low-carbon future. Oil and gas is produced across the globe. Why shouldn't it be Canadian?
Welcome back. Again, we're here at the Canada Strong and Free 2022 conference in Ottawa, Ontario. And guess who I bumped into? My fellow co-host or fellow host on Canadian Innovators, another program here on the News Forum. So Jocelyn, I saw you in the room. You took in that leadership debate for the CPC leadership. What'd you think?
Well, I was invigorated in a way because there was absolute continuity about our freedoms being taken away from the current Liberal government and Justin Trudeau's government, and an absolute commitment to do something about it. So I was invigorated that we're having that discussion, and very much around our freedoms and our liberties and how that has been taken away. I was also very energized that all of the leaders talked about the importance of our resource sector and how important that is to prosperity, specifically the middle class, high-paying jobs, and reinvigorating that in Canada and having our Canadian resource sector be the answer to global climate change. So, and getting our clean liquefied natural gas to market so China and India could come off coal. So I was invigorated for those two things.
Yeah, and I think that end of dependence on foreign natural gas, foreign coal, foreign oil has been definitely bolstered, sadly, because of the conflict in Ukraine and Russia. Now, you're right, there was a lot of focus on development, especially with Alberta. Alberta did come up a few times. I noticed Premier Jason Kenney was in the audience, so I'm sure he was very pleased to hear what kind of central role Alberta would play if one of these leadership contestants were to win, and obviously one will win.
Right, and the one thing I found shocking was that Patrick Brown decided to pass over this debate. So you have to wonder about his commitment to being the leader. This is the largest conservative conference in Canada, and yet he determined that it wasn't important enough for him to come. So that's concerning to me. How about you? Tell me what your highlight was of this.
I always love a good debate. You know, I was a leadership candidate once, and I really enjoy debates. So I was really pleasantly surprised that there was a lot of energy, that I was concerned it might become dull and people, the same old, but there was a lot of energy. There were clearly different agendas each candidate wanted to pursue. Dr. Leslyn Lewis came out very strong.
She was
completely
great.
different than her last leadership run. We got to hear a little bit more of Roman Baber, his first kind of foray on a national stage. That was interesting.
He is a hard one not to like. He was quite charming, and I think a lot of folks in the room had some great support for him. I was happy to see Pierre coming out swinging, as he should, and so I thought he had a great debate. I think there was a lot of support for him in the room. There was a lot of clapping and cheering. There were signs.
And we got to see a little bit of his attack dog, if you will, when he's in the House of Commons, when he's badgering the elite, the government, the Liberals. He actually turned that on Jean Charest at one point this evening on Huawei.
Right. It was absolutely a knockdown. That was a knockdown when it went to that, getting the question answered. He is great. He is like a dog with a bone in asking how much. And the question he asked this evening was, how much did Jean Charest earn from working for Huawei? And I think that was a valid question. It was one that was not answered. So I'd like to know the answer to that.
Well, and it would have been nice for that to segue into more of a fulsome discussion on Canada's national security and our concerns, because that's really what's at the crux of that issue is, what role will Canada play, especially when we're the lone member of the Five Eyes group that is engaging with Huawei. Very, very strong concerns there.
Yeah, absolutely. Our security is paramount, and we have to make sure that we're going to support that. And that kind of segues into security in the resource sector, because what we have learned from the Russia-Ukraine conflict was that energy is really a gateway to democracy. And we have energy here, and we need to develop that energy and get it to market, and that's not happening right now. So I was happy to see that was a big discussion point this evening.
And I always like to see what talking points came up in this debate and how they would parlay in a general election, knowing that the price of the pumps is so high now. We've had an increase in the carbon tax in various sectors, but obviously increase at the pumps. You know, Canadians really see that, and they feel that now when they're fueling up. It's really hitting them. So if they could hear that message that perhaps unleashing our energy sector could lessen the burden for them, I think that's a winning strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. At one point that I thought was missed by all the candidates was a discussion of manufacturing. They talked about having a resource strategy. We need a manufacturing strategy.
Absolutely.
And we saw how vulnerable we were during COVID with not having masks and gowns and ventilators manufactured here. I would have liked to have seen more discussion on manufacturing and having a strategy for manufacturing.
Okay, Jocelyn Bamford, thank you so much for joining us. We'll report more on the Canada Strong and Free in just a bit.
Mining has always been about discovery, but the more we mine its depths for the elements that drive our modern world, the more we discover what we have become as an industry, as a community. Dig into mining in Ontario today, and a lot more comes to the surface. Not just the minerals we've discovered underground, but the elements of our industry that combine to make mining so much more than we expect. There is an element of technology that goes so far beyond simply digging in the earth, helping lead the way in science, technology, engineering, and math, changing the ways we understand our universe, and pioneering technologies that touch all walks of life. There is an element of inclusion, a cross-cultural community that depends on and thrives on this diverse collective, providing opportunities for women and men, for Indigenous peoples, for new Canadians, and for all Canadians. There is an element of stewardship of our environment. As an industry that literally pulls from the earth the elements that make our civilized world possible, we are the shepherds of this physical world, and it's a responsibility we take personally and strive to improve on every day. There is an element of legacy to the work we do. We find ourselves as builders of communities, and our contributions to the cities and towns where we work are legacies that will live on far into the future. And there is an element of adventure. We are bold, pioneering people who build our futures on the frontiers, embracing the elements, the remoteness, the physical extremes that call us to venture where many would not. These are the elements that make up our industry. This is today's technology. This is mining.
It's packed to the rafters in the Edmonton Arena. Everyone is feeling the pressure on the Grabs as they await the American champs. Here's the Cleveland favorite Knits now, and boy, do they look impressive.
Look at their uniforms. I bet you could sure run in smart shorts like those.
Not that. Look, world champs, my eye.
Grads, we don't play for glory. We play the game for the game's sake. So tonight, you're going to earn that title by playing your game. Teamwork, passing. Let's show them what it means to play the Grads.
The Edmonton Grads were champions for 25 years. The record of 502 wins and only 20 losses is unmatched in all of sport.
Welcome. Again, we're here reporting from the Canada Strong and Free 2022 conference in Ottawa, Ontario, and I'm joined right now by Deanie Van Pelt, Dr. Deanie Van Pelt, who is a senior fellow with Cardis, with the Fraser Institute, and she's also president of Advance, an association of independent schools. Dr. Van Pelt, thank you so much for joining me today. We just came out of a session, which I was the panel coordinator, and you were a panelist on education reform. Why is education reform so important in Canada? Why is it needed?
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. It's great to be with you. Education reform is so necessary because education is getting out of step with parental beliefs and values. And it's also falling behind in terms of modernizing itself. So, modernization of education in the EU is way ahead of us. We need to keep up.
Okay, and give us some examples of how the EU has got it right with respect to education lately.
Well, yeah, it's a great question. They had a fabulous statement that they came out with in their statement for modernizing education, that parents should have the right to have their kids educated according to their own pedagogical, philosophical, and religious convictions. This is 4 years ago. This is a very significant statement to make, that parents would be deeply involved according to their convictions in their kids' education.
Now, we oftentimes hear how parents are frustrated with the state of education, whether it would be in Ontario with some of the education reforms or even lack thereof that have come in. We know that there are different systems administered provincially across this country. Alberta has a little bit more school choice. Ontario seems to have a little bit less. What can we do if in Ontario, for example, to open up more school choice?
Sure. So choice for parents, we've got a lot of it in Ontario, but they're all government provided. English public, French public, English Catholic, French Catholic. I mean, there's a lot of choice if you're okay with government provided education. And that's where Alberta, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, there's a lot of independent schooling going on there, but it receives some government funding. So you get a lot of diversity and you have a lot of access to education for families of all sorts of means when government supports that kind of diversity. Not only government provided diversity, but also independently provided diversity.
Well, it's a good point, because for many parents, when they make the choice to send their children to a government-provided school or independent, cost can be prohibitive. And if there is some government money going to fund that other form of independent school, that could be an incentive for parents to, explore that option.
Absolutely. And in Ontario, it's almost counterintuitive, but we've had an explosion of of independent schools opening this year, last year during the pandemic, but even in the 10 or 15 years prior to the pandemic. In fact, over the last 10 years, we've had over 65% growth in independent schools opening in Ontario.
And why do you think that happened?
Well, I think a number of explanations, a concern about declining academic quality, and certainly the PISA scores bear that out. We rank high, but we're declining in all subject areas. I think what some might call the professionalization of education, where parents are just left out of the education almost entirely, and the school system is making all of the decisions. And then possibly during COVID, of course, parents had a little peek behind the scenes as to what was really going on, and many became discouraged with what they saw. And they have taken it into their own hands with teachers, with other educational experts to establish new schools.
And I think we have seen many headlines from the United States. We've seen them definitely from Florida, even Virginia, with their recent gubernatorial election, how parents have sort of had enough. They found their voice, they're speaking out and demanding change. Could we expect a similar kind of change if parents spoke out at the school board levels, in Ontario and Alberta and BC?
Well, I think change definitely can come from the ground, from parents speaking out and from parents acting, communities coming together, acting, and in many ways to establish alternative institutions. But I think change can also come from our governments. There can be, very simply, there can just be respect stated for alternate providers of education. Instead of viewing these new pockets of innovation and entrepreneurship with suspicion, they could be appreciated. And we do see that, as I said, in the 4 provinces to the west of us, there's an appreciation for the diversity to the education system that these alternate providers offer. We could have more imagination, that education can be excellent if it has a variety, a diversity of forms. It's called educational pluralism, and it is exploding across the world. We've got some countries in Europe, Netherlands, Denmark. They're outstanding leaders in this. We need to furnish our imagination with what's possible to respect more diversity of provision of education in Ontario and across Canada.
Okay, and of course, more school option, more education diversity will mean more choice for parents and ultimately, hopefully, better education for the children, ultimately.
Absolutely. That's what we're after.
Thank you, Dr. Jeannie Van Pelt. Again, we're here at the Canada Strong and Free Conference in Ottawa, Ontario.